Welcome to another episode of Courageous Me. And I'm really excited today because I've got a gorgeous woman all the way from New Jersey coming to talk to us. And here's the thing, I don't know anything about her other than what I've read online. So, everyone listening in, you're going to be getting to know her at the same time as I do. So, Terry, I'm so excited to see you. So before we get into the nitty gritty and find out more about who you are and what you do, can I just ask what excites you to have a conversation with me today about courage?
Well, thank you so much, Kim, for having me on your podcast. I absolutely love the name and the theme and everything that you talk about. And what it really excited me is that you are empowering women to find their courage to do incredible things, to do scary things, to do exciting things that maybe we never really believed or, thought were impossible in the past that could potentially be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I love too is the little bit of your story that I do know. There's some big stuff in there, but I'm sure there's also just some little things that you've done that have made a really big difference in your life. So I'm really excited to unpack this with you. So, Terry, before we get into my very first question around courage, could you just tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Absolutely. So, I am a women's health and fitness and transformation coach. And what that means is I help women to achieve their goals, whether that is weight loss or whether that, with some women, it's weight gain, strength gain, and those types of things.
Oh, how exciting. Weight gain. Oh my God, we've got to go into this. And that's not something that I normally hear. Usually it is more around weight loss. So that's interesting in itself. So Terry, on that note, could you share with us when was a moment that you can recall, and I don't care how far back you've got to go, where you really had to reach in and find some courage in your life?
Well, the first time as an adult that I had to find courage where I did not have an option, right? So as a child, there's a lot of those types of moments, but I had to find my courage, but I didn't have a choice. I couldn't bail. But as an adult, the first time I really had to find courage was I had a public speaking engagement and I was literally trembling in my shoes for days before the event. And I was trembling during the event. I was terrified, but I did it.
Oh, I so want to unpack this one because I do a lot of public speaking. I'm about to run a public speaking masterclass in Melbourne in a couple of weeks because I hear so many women want to do public speaking, but the fear just overrides them. So tell me about why you still did it, even though your body has, come out in all the massive trembles.
Well, because then at the time, the company that I had started was invited at a prestigious event to present on particular topics that the audience was interested in. And it was a great opportunity. I mean, in the long run, what a better way to get a great message out there to people that are interested in the value that I could provide and in the benefit of my knowledge. And so that kind of kept me going, that despite the fact that I wanted to go hide in the closet and never speak of this ever again to anyone and just bail, I I did it. I did it, and despite being afraid and extremely anxious and afraid that things were going to go wrong, which of course they did, that I was going to look silly, which of course I felt like I was being silly, and everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And when I was done, I was actually exhilarated. It was almost like a high that you get when you're finished this scary thing, and I started doing it over and over and over and over again. I think I had booked probably about 3 speaking engagements every month after that just to get over the fear. But yes,
Oh, I love that. And how old were you when you did that first one, the trembling one?
I was in my mid-30s and extremely overweight.
Oh, okay. We're gonna open that can of worms. Okay, that's really interesting. So that was the first time you'd ever got on a stage, and you had to do it because this was the business you'd started. What business was it?
It's a marketing agency.
But you hadn't had to do any sort of formal public speaking before that. Is that correct?
Never. I actually no, I did. I had a college presentation in front of the class, and what ended up happening is I got up on the podium and my voice was gone. I I would try to talk into the microphone and nothing would come out. So I it was literally like and then nothing would happen. And so yeah, that was terrifying, obviously.
And that's when you're at college. So, of course, from college to in your mid-30s, when you've had to get up there, that moment would haunt you, right? It completely would haunt you. And so,
Yes.
so when you're trembling and you're standing on stage, and I'm assuming words were coming out now, do you remember how you were feeling, or is it all just a complete blur and a blank that you can't recall?
It was very interesting because the first 5 minutes were terrifying.
Mm.
And as I kept going, I found my groove and I started to feel more like myself. And one of the reasons I believe that I was able to get through it is because the terror that I felt previously in the prior few weeks forced me to prepare, over prepare, really. And so I would practice this speech and this presentation over and over and over and over and over again until I memorized it as well as I possibly could. And what ended up happening during the presentation is that the entire slideshow, like the electronic slideshow that you usually have during presentations at these kinds of things, it
Yeah.
failed.
Of
It
course it
wasn't,
did.
it didn't work. And so they had the AV people there and everybody there trying to figure out how to fix it, and it would not come on. So I had to do the whole thing blindly. If I hadn't memorized and prepared as well as I did, I would have been in big trouble. But yeah, it worked out because of preparation ultimately.
Yeah, and look, isn't that kind of, a big lesson just in life that when there's something to, is at stake, that preparation, you can't underestimate it. So, oh, wow, I love that. And of course, now you speak all the time, you've got your own podcast and but don't you feel this is something that I share all the time as well. The more you do it, the easier it gets.
Exactly, exactly. And so that was my motto essentially was, you know, I would tell myself like you're so afraid of this, you're so terrified of doing this, you have to do it. Because you can't live in this fear every time this thing comes up. You're going to just collapse and emotionally just drown in anxiety. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We got to fix that. And courage. You need courage to do that.
Oh, totally. And I always talk about, courage is contagious, that the more you do, the more you build that courage muscle, which means the more you can do. But it takes baby steps. And I love that even through all the trembles and that when you finished, that you use the word exhilaration. Oh, I love that. So Terry, on that note, I'm looking at you now, right? And you are really like, you look really super fit and trim. You said you were overweight. Talk to me about that was then and this is now. What happened in the meantime? Because obviously I've read a little bit about you, uh, but how you're showing up right now is certainly not that.
Yes, no, that was what the way that I would describe those years were. Um, when you own a business and you're also a woman who got pregnant and had 2 children while running a business, not just running it, but growing it, right, from scratch. and fairly ambitious, fairly confident, kind of a go-getter, high achieving, all those things, right? When you are that type of person, you try to do everything, right? You try to have your family, you run your business, you travel, you work really hard, you do all the things, right?
Mm.
What ends up happening is that you drive yourself into the ground and you forget to take care about your to take care of yourself. You begin to eat emotionally. You start to gain weight, but there's no time in your day and there's no time in your life for you ultimately, right? You have time for everything else and everyone else except yourself. And so I
Mhm.
started gaining weight after both of my pregnancies. That naturally women gain weight. I couldn't get it off though, and then I had another baby. I could not get that weight off. And then slowly but surely, I was wearing pregnancy clothes 3 years after my pregnancy was finished.
Mm.
I was 210 pounds at 5'3". I'm not sure what the measurements are
I
where
was going
you
to say,
are.
what's that in kilos? But it was more than what you should have weighed for being 5'3". Yeah.
Yes, I think I would say about 100 kilos, maybe.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That gives me some context. Yep. Beautiful.
Around, not exactly, but it's 2 pounds to a kilo, I think. And
Okay.
so, yeah, and so I was very obese. I was very heavy and very unhealthy. And I found myself at 37, starting to get pre-diabetes. I ended up in the hospital twice because I thought I was having a heart attack. I had to go see cardiologists. I had ovarian cysts. I had all kinds of things going wrong. And I was essentially told that I need to lose weight by a holistic doctor who finally figured out what was wrong with me. That it wasn't necessarily anything that could be addressed by the healthcare system other than to give me medicine, essentially. That wasn't going to solve the underlying problem. And so that's when I began the quest of getting in shape, losing weight, lifting weights, eating nutritious food that was not full of sugar and empty calories. So that's when I stopped drinking alcohol. That's another one, right? So
Well,
high achieving women have a tendency to use food and alcohol to cope with the stress that they're under. So that's where I was at.
oh, wow. And can I just ask, just, I want to carry this conversation on, but just zipping back a little bit. As a child, did you ever have any issues with eating or weight or any of those things that have now shown up when you're in your 30s and the pressure of, a family and a business and all of that?
As a child, I was actually underweight. I did
Ah,
not, yeah, I did not have any issues as a child. My issues started after the age of, I would say, about 27 to
yeah.
37 was that period of uncontrollable weight gain. And like that panic and anxiety I described before about stepping on stage.
Mm,
That's what it feels like when you're gaining weight uncontrollably and you don't know what to do. You don't
mm,
know where to
mm,
go. You try every diet out there. You try starvation diet. You try cardio, nonstop for hours a day. You try all the diets that are out there, and there's many I can recite, and nothing ever truly works. So it works for a little bit, and then the weight comes back on viciously. So it comes back on. You don't just gain back what you originally lost, but you gain more on top of that. And so I
mm.
was in this cycle of constantly losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight. And eventually that led me to be over 100 kilos or 210 pounds.
Wow. And so, and this is such a common story, isn't it? Where, I know I've got so many people in my life that I know that have battled and had the yo-yo weight all their lives. When you finally started to make sustainable inroads that were changing, the results and have now stuck. What was it about then? Was it that you had this health diagnosis that you really got to do it? Or was there something else that was going on? Like, why then and not 2 years earlier, 3 years earlier? What was it about when you made these different changes that have now obviously taken and continued on?
Yeah, so the last round, the one that stuck, this one last round was 8 years ago.
Mm,
And at that time, I decided that I was going to ask for help. That was the difference maker. Why it actually worked was because it wasn't necessarily that I just couldn't lose weight. It was the fact that my mindset around what I thought of myself was upside down. My habits were completely going against my goal, right? And so what I was doing is I was in a cycle of dieting and then binging, and then dieting and then binging, and then dieting and then binging. And that
mm,
habit of using food and alcohol to cope with my internal state of unhappiness underneath it, right? Because I wasn't taking care of myself. There was no room
mm,
in my life for me. Um, that was contributing to this addiction in a sense, right? It's an addiction, and it's a coping mechanism that we use to change our state of being internally to make us feel better about the life that we're living that we're unhappy with. And so that's
mm,
where I had to unravel that whole thing with someone to help me. I had a coach, for a fitness coach, ultimately, is who helped me unravel all that.
mm. But I love that it wasn't even about the food, the diet, the nutrition. You actually had to get inside your mind first. You had to fix what was going on in there. When I say fix it, you had to work on it in order for any of the other physical changes to actually not only take hold, but to take hold and to stick around. Because so I guess, and I'd love your view on this. When you were at, say, your heaviest, how was your self-esteem and how you valued yourself? How did that sort of play out?
Well, it's very interesting because I had a pretty decent self-esteem when it came to my professional life. I was very confident there. I felt I very empowered. I felt very, very much capable of everything I was doing professionally. I had no problems with anything I had to do and putting myself out there. But when it came to feeling good in my own body, when it came to feeling good about what I looked like specifically, right, and what I felt like, my mindset was that it didn't matter. What I looked like and what I felt like, it didn't matter because no one cared what I looked like, and it wasn't efficient. It wasn't important enough for me to step back from all the professional working things I was doing to take care of myself so I can look good. It was vain. It was
Yeah.
frivolous, right? And so the mantra or the thought pattern that was going on in my mind is you have two kids. They're more important than what you look like and what you feel like. You have a business. That's way more important. You have employees. They're depending on you. Who the heck cares what you look like? Nobody cares.
Except you did, deep down, you did care. You did care, yeah. And it's interesting actually, because I know other people that say if they're carrying more weight, it and it affects their self-esteem or their self-worth, their self-value, that then translates also into their professional worlds or the work that they're doing. It's really interesting here to see that you've almost, compartmentalized. This is my work, this is who I am at work, and I'm really good at what I do and nothing affects it. But over here was, your health and your body and how you felt. But that was kind of a luxury to think that you could look, that you could pay attention and put more energy and effort into that. Wow, that is so interesting. What growing up has influenced that, do you think? Was there anything where it's like, what I look like is not important? That's such an interesting statement that you just shared. So growing up, what sort of messages do you remember when it came to things like aesthetically, what someone looks like versus, how accomplished or how successful they are?
That's a very deep question you just asked me.
Mm, I'm so
Yes,
curious.
yes. So I had a very interesting childhood. Um, my biological father was an alcoholic.
Okay.
My mother divorced him when I was 3, and she got remarried. And my stepfather was amazing, and I had a brother and a sister from her second marriage. But at one point, in a divorce, the parent who gets custody keeps the child, right? And the other parent has visitation. And so what ended up, from what I remember, what ended up happening is that my father would come for his visitations in the beginning, and then one day he just disappeared. There was no warning. There was no, hey, I can't make it. He just stopped coming. So I would wait for him during his visitation time every week or whatever the days were. I remember this very clearly. And I would wait for him. I would sit there and wait for him, and he would just never show up. And I waited for a very, very long time, for years, probably. And so he never showed up, and I never saw him again, because when I was 11, my mother and my stepfather escaped communism in 1987, and we ended up in a refugee camp in 89, from 87 to 89, and the wall fell in 89. But then we immigrated to the United States in September of 1989. And so I never saw him since then. So I haven't seen, right? And so it's interesting because that kind of thing, now that I think back to it, when I hear other people have this kind of experience, and I kind of try and understand what that child, that who used to be me, felt like,
Mm.
ultimately, when that happens to you, you feel that you don't matter. You just don't matter because the one out of 2 people that are most important in your life disappeared because they didn't care, right?
Oh, oh, I can feel it. Oh, I can feel it. When you say you immigrated to the United States, where from? Where had you been? Where did you grow up?
So I'm originally Armenian, from Armenia, which is used to be a Russian republic back in the day. I'm not sure if, I don't think they still are. Um, and but I was born in Bulgaria. So Bulgaria is in Eastern Europe, right on the Black Sea. Um, yeah.
Okay, so this is making sense. Oh my goodness. But now you've kind of put a piece of the puzzle together for me around why, you're doing amazing at work, you're excelling, you're a high achiever, and what you look like doesn't matter. And that would be a luxury. Now I understand, if you grew up with an experience where you didn't think you were kind of good enough, for a parent to even want to spend time with you or to come and see you. Okay, this is now making sense, which is why I guess any change had to come from the mindset level and from the inner level, not just doing the stuff like the dieting or the extra cardio, etc., etc. So when you did ask for help, and you said it was in the physical training stuff, what mindset stuff did you have to work on, or did you get the support on, that really started to make the shift for you that allowed this change to be sustainable?
It was a lot of trial and error, because what I like to say is that I'm a very slow learner, apparently, when it comes to myself. I mean, I can learn other things at lightning speeds, but when it comes to understanding my own brain, I have a complete blind spot to that. And so I wasn't aware. I had no awareness that any of these things were happening in my subconscious, where I would, and it was always about things that concerned me personally. It was never, I never had that problem with clients and projects and work and all kinds of things like that. I was very much a go-getter, a finisher. People like to have me on their teams, all those things. But then in the background, personally, I was failing miserably
Oh,
in anything that had to do with me personally. And so, but I had no awareness of that. It was completely in the dark.
yeah.
And so there was a lot of failures. I failed a lot. I failed my coach a lot. I would do something for a certain period of time and then completely fall off the wagon. I would do my training and, very consistently for a while and then completely go dark and just not communicate, not show up essentially to where I was supposed to show
Mm.
up, not communicate, didn't have an explanation why, like what happened, none of that, right? So I would go completely dark. And over a period of 8 years, I finally understood why that was happening, and I had to work. I had a lot of work to do.
Just before you carry on, what realization did you come to? Like, what was explaining this, going dark and not showing up and, kind of ghosting the poor trainer? What was going on?
From the outside, it was any type of emotional trigger.
Mm.
So anytime something would happen that would cause me any kind of emotional turmoil or unease, right? And it didn't have to be something small. They were, big things would happen throughout
Yeah.
the years, right? And so anytime I would get hit emotionally, I would go into a cocoon. So I would just shut down completely. Internally, I would still function,
Yeah.
right? Like everything else would still be going on, everything would work, this, family, etc. But internally, I put myself in jail ultimately, and I would put a stop to anything that had to do with my goals, with my happiness, with what I wanted to do, with how I felt. It was put to the side.
Wow. And I guess getting to the point of realizing that and also connecting back to little girl Terry and not feeling, good enough or worthy enough and all of that. It's all playing out, right? Like it doesn't just vaporize. And I love that whole understanding that you would revert back into your shell. And that means going dark on other people. Yet, and I'm assuming this, but in your work life, you were still, full on board, going for it, go getting, achieving, and everything. Oh, God, this is so interesting. So, when you have come to this realization, and I'm assuming it was over time, how did that sort of play out? How did that now awareness, which you said you didn't have before, how did that start to change things?
I started to under first the first step was to gain the awareness that I was participating in this behavior, right?
Mm,
And understanding what are the triggers and knowing that, okay, the last four times I went AWOL or I went dark, these were the things that happened. And their commonality was the emotional hit. You take an emotional hit, you get really hurt, and you shut down.
mm,
And so I understood that, okay, so the next time that happens to me, I'm gonna try and just sit in it for a little bit, right? Just try and sit in that feeling of extreme discomfort and extreme emotional pain and recognize that that's what's happening to me rather than shutting down and just going dark. I'm
Mm.
gonna try and feel it. I'm gonna try and feel it. And even while I'm feeling it, I'm still going to try and complete these tasks. I'm still going to try and eat this way, the way I've been supposed to be eating. I'm still going to go and do my training at the gym. I'm still going to show up for myself during this time of emotional crisis and console the little girl, right? Tell her, like, hey, it's okay. And I know we're feeling this way. I know this is not fair. I know this really hurts, but I'm here now. Like, I'm going to take care of you, even if in the past nobody did.
Oh,
And I did
yeah.
that over and
Oh,
over again.
yeah. And can I just get you to share before you really got this awareness that when an emotional trigger happens, instead of just, running and hiding back inside your shell, to actually sit with it. Can you give me an example of where before you had that realization where you did that? Like what event happened where you did retreat and go AWOL?
Sure. So let's say I would have a fight with a family member over something.
Yep.
And it would, maybe some things were said that were hurtful. But that person is really important to me. That person really matters to me. So, that would trigger me. If someone passes away, like for example, a family member passes away, and obviously there's a lot of emotional processing that has to happen when you lose somebody. Instead, what I would do is I would just shut down,
Yep.
you know, but not to feel it, because I didn't want to feel that extreme pain. But what came with that is completely abandoning myself in the process.
Oh, yeah, that whole abandonment. Oh my goodness. And of course, going back to being a child, the whole abandoning then. So when you then had this awareness and do you remember the first emotional trigger that happened after? And I know it's not as direct as, before and after and, a line in the sand, and then you realized you had to sit in that feeling. Do you remember what, or an example of an event where it would normally have been your pattern of retreat, but instead you sat there and felt? Do you remember any example there?
Oh yeah, big one. This is like a movie kind of story.
Oh, I love it. It's so exciting. Exciting in the sense that I feel like I'm really getting to understand some of the things that I see, say, online about you. It's like, oh, this is giving me the juice behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, you're incredible, Kim. I don't think I've ever had this kind of conversation with anybody on a podcast.
I hope you're still comfortable, but
Yes.
courageous. Hmm.
Yeah, no, you know, in order to ask the right questions, you have to be courageous. So I commend you for that. But yeah, so the first time that crazy story, not kind of morbid, but it's a crazy, crazy story. So in 2020,
Ooh.
right in the middle of COVID, I get a message on my LinkedIn from someone who said that he's my brother, and he was notifying me that my father had passed away in the previous year in November 2019. I believe it was November. And so I read this message and I thought to myself, there's no way, because I was told that he had passed away 10 years prior. So I was told, I don't know if it was on purpose or by mistake or it was erroneous. I don't know the intent of why I was told 10 years prior that he had passed, but he hadn't. He was alive for the whole 10 years that I thought he was dead. And so I get a message in 2020 in February, I believe, or March or something like that, right at the beginning of COVID. And it said that he had just passed away. So I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a scam. I said, there's no way. But it was true. He had just passed. And the ironic part was that I was in the country, right, maybe about an hour away from him in August of 2019. So I could have gone to meet him before he died for the first time since I was 3 years, 4 years old. And that shook me to the core. I was really surprised at how much that affected me, to the point where I think I must have sat in my kitchen for 2 months and cried nonstop.
Wow. But yet, finding out that he'd only passed away then, yet you actually thought he'd been passed away for 10 years. When you first found out that he'd passed away the 10 years earlier, how did you react?
I had no reaction.
Wow. Okay. So did you have no reaction because at that time you weren't aware about how you process things emotionally? Is that why? And now you have? Don't
No
know.
idea. When
Wow.
I heard it, it was like, oh, okay, whatever. Like it was that kind of a reaction, like, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. Like what am I like what is that, like it was almost like, what is that? What does that even have to do with me? Like I haven't seen him in since I'm
Mm.
4 years old, so it's not like whatever. That was literally how I reacted the first time. And
Yeah.
then the second time, I was a basket case for months.
Oh, wow. I've got goosebumps. Oh, by the way, was that really your brother?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and you didn't know this was a brother of yours.
No. And get this. He and I share a birthday 7 years apart. So my father ended up getting remarried. He had another child. He was my half brother, and he and I are born on the same date.
Just 7 years back. Oh my God, I've got goosebumps. Oh my God, this is a Hollywood movie, right? so, so you're processing the father who you've not seen, who you thought had died 10 years ago. You've now worked out it's only died a couple of months earlier. You've also got a brother that you didn't know. How did you feel or respond to that piece of information?
Very unsure
Mm.
and very there was a lot of trepidation. It's a very surreal thing for somebody to tell you that you have a brother, and your father, who you thought was dead, was not dead, and now he's really dead. And it's just, I mean, when I even say this stuff out loud, I'm like, whoa. But
Oh, but also, Terry, what's also coming up for me as you're sharing this is that the weight and, putting on all the extra weight, realizing you're not shifting it, going and realizing that there's some mindset and some inner work that needs to be done in order for the physical to happen is actually teaching you how to sit with emotion. So it's almost like this event. So the undiscovered brother, the father who passed away, it's almost like that couldn't come out until you were going to be in a position where you're better equipped to emotionally deal with that. Because imagine if that, had have happened at another time. Wow, this is so interesting. And so that all happened, and you've now learned to change the behavior to sit with things. But you said for 2 months you were literally like on your bathroom floor. How did you get out of that and come through? What did you do? What sort of tools helped you to deal with this?
yes, so the tools were the things that I was doing to help myself feel better, right? So the habits that I was building, which were to eat balanced meals, I did not throw that out into the garbage when I was in that state. I continued to go to the gym. I continued to strength train. I continued to feel uncomfortable in the state that I was in, but still do those things that were taking care of me. And that's when I knew I had a breakthrough and that this was going to stick this time, because despite the fact that I was feeling like a complete basket case, I was still taking care of myself. I actually did not run out the door, and say, "Oh, I can't deal with this. See you later."
Yeah, and I understand why you use that word breakthrough, because you've realized that you've now broken an unhelpful pattern that you've had for how long, who knows, but that you've actually broken that. How did that even feel for you, knowing that, yep, this is the pattern and you can actually work through it? What kind of feelings does that bring up for you?
It's very comforting to know that you have your own back. That is a very grounding feeling that for anyone that's listening that's in this pattern of
Mm,
self-abandonment, right? Because if you
mm,
think about it, that was my initial trauma in life, right? That was the first time my heart was really broken. I was abandoned by somebody I adored, loved deeply, and I kept repeating that trauma in my life over and over and over and over again by self-abandoning myself, almost like saying, whoever little me was, yeah, you're not worthy of me taking care of you because your own father didn't take care of you, didn't care, abandoned you. So I'm out. And so I kept repeating that pattern over and over subconsciously all the time until I finally stopped. And the feeling that you have once you break that pattern, whatever your pattern is, doesn't
mm,
necessarily have to be abandonment. It could be rejection, it could be judgment, it could be any embarrassment, shame, it could be any of those things. Once you break that pattern of stopping self shame or stopping self judgment or stopping self abandonment, you start to feel very grounded. You integrate, you almost realign and reintegrate with your true being, because at some point that trauma disconnected you, right? So you became two different people. It was you here and your ego on the other side, and the ego
mm,
kept repeating the pattern. But once you break through, you integrate inside of you, you become whole almost again, and you just keep moving forward. Now, do you have opportunities where these things can like rile you up again? Absolutely. The pattern is so deep
mm.
and it's so old that if we don't keep our eyes and ears open, and have awareness that this can come back at any moment, because it's been there for so long, so why wouldn't it, right? It doesn't go away. I mean, it's not going to disappear. But if we are not constantly scanning our environment, scanning our mind, checking for viruses and bugs from the past, it can come back, and it does. But now you have the strength and the courage to
Yeah.
handle it because you handled it once before. So it gets easier and easier and easier as time goes on. The more you practice this
Mm.
awareness and alignment with yourself, it gets easier.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And, even as you're talking about all of this, yes, I know you do a lot of work around the physical stuff for our bodies and the food we put in and the nourishment. But it goes back to that inner stuff, doesn't it? What's going on inside your mind? What are the patterns? What are, say, some of the things that have gone on that you've taken on board, not even consciously, that have been playing out? And this sort of, I'm almost visualizing you standing on the stage, carrying more weight, but doing it because you've got your work and you're excelling in your work, but you're two different people almost. I love that analogy that the two then integrate to become the one, and that's of course why and where you are now. So how did all of this translate into you becoming a like a women's transformation coach and all of the work that you were doing on yourself? Where did this then become not just doing it for you, but doing it to help others?
Absolutely. What a great question. So, between the ages of 25 to about 42, 43, I had my own company. It was a marketing agency that did all kinds of production and, videos and websites and stuff like that. And at one point, we had grown to 40 employees and a lot of other contractors and clients and all kinds of things, right? Now, during the process of my own transformation, I was so deeply, deeply changed on such a profound level where I understood that what I was doing before as my career was not, it wasn't calling to me anymore. I felt that that wasn't where I needed to be, because this entire healing journey, as I call it, so many of us have the same problem, right? It's not as simple as, eat these foods, do the gym thing, and sleep enough hours, and then you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to be fine. And anyone that approaches it from that perspective, I
Mm,
think, is not necessarily helping their clients to be successful, because it does
mm,
require very deep internal change. And so I started going into that direction. And the way that I look at it is, um, this truly is my purpose and my passion. It became my calling. This is all I do now. I absolutely adore all the women that I work with, because we become so intimately connected to one another. We share things that, well, how did you work this out, and what happened to you, and how did this go, and how did you solve this? And it's healing on so many levels, that's where I feel I can bring the most value from my own experience and from all the knowledge that I've gained in the past 6 years with all my certifications. I mean, the certifications are, of course, part of the journey, but the
mm.
actual living in your own skin, knowing what it feels like to be 210 pounds and having to go to the gym and crying every day and getting through emotional eating and doing all these things, right? Alcohol, right? Being somewhat of an alcoholic, all of these things play a really big role in how I help other women to get through it, right? Because they can.
Yeah, and having someone to help them who also has firsthand gone through this. I mean, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? Anyone who thinks they've got to do this kind of stuff alone, they don't. And it's actually never as successful as doing it with others. Just tell me about the alcohol one, because I find this really interesting. And ironically, this morning, when I drop my kids at school, I listened to the Mel Robbins podcast. I'm sure you're familiar with Mel Robbins, and it was all on alcohol. And, as a woman who's going through perimenopause, my relationship with alcohol has completely changed, and we're no longer friends, which is kind of a good thing. But tell me about that, especially when you have had an alcoholic father, albeit only known him for a very short period of time. Alcohol and food have become kind of your friends that have helped numb the pain when you were growing up to avoid emotion. How's that changed now, and how does it play out in your life?
Yeah, I mean, anything was really my friend growing up to deal with not dealing with anything, right?
Yeah.
So, cigarettes, alcohol, you name it, okay? Anything that would help me ignore my actual feelings.
Yep.
And so at one point in my late 30s, I found myself, and I knew I had the awareness, by the way. So I had the awareness that I have the alcoholic gene, right? And I was always on the watch for that. I always felt like, okay, there's a certain point in which there's no coming back for you. Like I
Mm,
knew that. I would tell myself that there's a certain point where, you could step over this edge and you're going to be gone. Like you're going to
mm.
become a full-blown
Yep.
alcoholic, because technically it's a genetic predisposition, right? So if you have an alcoholic, a real alcoholic, it's a gene it's something with the gene is modified,
Mm.
an anomaly or something like that. I can't
Mhm.
explain it properly.
That's okay,
But
we get the
I
drift, yeah.
yeah, but I knew that, right? So I knew that there was a point of no return, and then one day I found myself waking up first thing in the morning and thinking, do I have enough vodka in the fridge?
Mm.
Why? Because I was drinking two vodkas every night. So that started becoming a habit, right? So every night after work, I would have my two vodka on the rocks with a lime, basil, and mint. That was the thing. I had that with all my chocolate.
But it was only 2 vodkas. It wasn't 7 vodkas. It was only 2, but you were thinking about it when you'd wake up in the morning.
Yes. Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
so first it starts with wine, right?
Yeah.
So first you start with one glass of wine,
Yep.
then you're like, oh, well, time goes on, your body adapts. You're like, oh, well, I can have two because one doesn't do it anymore. And then you have three, and then four glasses later, you drank the bottle, and now you're a bottle in, and you're like, well, yeah, this doesn't do it anymore either. So let me get the vodka, and then it's one vodka, and then it's two, and now it's thinking about it in the morning, and like little by little, before you know it, you are gone.
Um, yeah, and
Yeah,
aware that, the disposition was potentially there for you, so when you start doing this, so do you drink it all now?
I don't drink. Nope,
At all? No.
nope.
Yeah.
And if I do, like, let's say I go somewhere and we're at an event or something like that, I have zero interest whatsoever in alcohol at this point.
Yep.
But let's say it's somebody wants to toast or whatever, I'll order a beer because I hate beer. And so I'll just walk around with a beer, like some kind of like fruity, like, happy kind of low alcohol content beer, and I'm not a beer drinker, so I just walk around with this glass and no one bothers me about why am I not drinking, because in our society we all got to drink.
Oh, well, this is why I find this really fascinating too. And it's certainly something that, I have 1 glass of wine if I have a drink, that's all I have. And I'm even now starting to question that because it's just, I don't know, it's just not agreeing with me. Also, not being a beer drinker, I reckon I'm going to use that tactic. If you have just society, and the expectation around alcohol, even if you just have it in your hand, avoids all other conversation around alcohol. But you don't like it, so you're not going to drink it. Oh, I think that's absolutely gorgeous. What a gorgeous tactic. And what about food? What's your relationship with food now? Obviously, you've come a long way. How do you and food kind of hang out together?
Well, food and I love each other. And if I want to indulge,
Mm.
depending on what my goal is, like sometimes my goal in certain cycles and time frames is to gain weight, and other times is to drop body fat. So when you are working on building muscle in your 40s, the best way to build muscle is to be in a slightly caloric surplus, a slight caloric surplus, where you get to eat a little bit more food in order to promote muscle growth. And then there's some cycles where you're in a smaller caloric deficit to try and cut down body fat that you might have gained while you were in a surplus. And so what I do now, I can still eat whatever I want, right? So macro-based nutrition is the type of nutrition where you eat a balanced meal of protein, carbs, and fat. So there's really nothing that's off the table. You can have whatever kind of food you want as long as it fits within a particular framework for how many carbs, how many proteins, how much fat. And so if I want to have a piece of cheesecake or chocolate cake or whatever kind of dessert it may be, there are a lot of options nowadays where you can make a protein cheesecake that has a lot less sugar and a lot less carbs and possibly less fat than a traditional store-bought one. So if I feel like having one, I'll make one. There's options for ice cream right now, right? So ice cream and I were very good friends every night during my time of obesity where I would eat a pint of ice cream, which is almost 1,400 calories in one sitting. Nowadays, you can make a protein ice cream and use a machine called Ninja Creamy, and you can make your own ice cream, and it's a big giant pint of ice cream for 250 calories. So you can still eat what you like. You're just being smart about it.
Oh, I love that. I'm also got a very lovely relationship with ice cream, so we don't hang out very often because it's way too much love there. But I love the idea that you could actually make an ice cream that gives you your protein, that obviously a bit of fat in there, that keeps the calories down, and that you're going to really enjoy it at the same time. It's just golden. I absolutely love that. So, what is your biggest weakness now with food? Like, your sweetest temptation that is really naughty, but if you do have it, you're going to just totally enjoy every single second of it. What's that for you?
Dark chocolate or any kind of chocolate mousse. So it's a
Mm.
consistency and taste kind of thing. It's a creamy chocolate mousse. It's very hard to resist.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I know when you're in for time, it's like, oh my God, this is just zoomed by. I got so many questions to ask you. Just one, being a woman past sort of, say 40s going into 50s, that whole perimenopause, I know you do work in this space. With that changing, with the changing hormones and that, what do you think are the things that women are not doing right, which is why they're then keeping the weight on or putting the weight on and less likely to move it, because of that sort of life stage?
Absolutely. So here's another kicker. My period ghosted me 6 years ago, and I have not seen it since. So I'm fully menopausal at age 40. I'm 48 now. So it disappeared when I was 42.
Oh,
Gone. Never
wow.
seen it again. And I'm pretty sure in 6 years, all my hormones are done, right? However, I don't feel that way. Okay, I absolutely do not feel that way. And my opinion, I could be wrong, but my opinion is that the effects that we feel from the hormones are not as pronounced as we're made to believe. What we're actually feeling is the cumulative effect of our habits up to that point, right? And
Mm,
so when our habits are not in line with our changing body, changing our habits, changing our behaviors, changing our mindset around things, when things used to work at 20, they're not going to work at 45, 50, right? We have to change with our changes, right?
mm,
And a lot of people just don't have the courage to admit that. They want to blame, and I'm so tired of hearing this stuff, right? Oh, it's all about menopause, it's all the hormones. Sure, yes, there's a lot of side effects and things that happen
mm,
because of the hormones and being in perimenopause and menopause, but there's
mm.
a lot of things that can be done to counteract that, and that involves a lot of behavioral changes, which are very difficult to do.
Oh, why didn't I meet you 5 years ago? Life could have been so much easier and skipped a whole lot of hard work. Yeah, I must say I don't know any of the science behind it and as you would, but totally from a woman going through all that and the changes I've had to make. And to be honest, the changes that I've made, the habits I've changed, triggered by, how the hormones are playing out, are actually better for me anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like seriously, like I say, thank you, perimenopause, because what you've done has actually put me on so many levels in a much better place than I would have done just by choice. Mm.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly. And
wow.
that's why it drives me bonkers when people start blaming menopause because we can't avoid menopause. Like,
Yep.
it sounds like we're doomed, right? Like when you hear this society and the narrative out there, it's like we're doomed. Once you hit perimenopause, you're basically done.
You're
But
out.
that's so not
No,
true.
no. There's a woman, I can't remember the name of the book now. She's a doctor who this is her specialty. And her book's actually called The Upgrade, which is when you go through, perimenopause into life post-menopausal, that it's actually an upgrade if you choose it to be. Okay. Some look
I
at it as doom
agree.
and gloom, whereas I've very much embraced the upgrade. I love it. Oh, Terry, I could just sit here and talk to you forever. Just on that note, what's the next thing you've got to really reach in then and find some courage for in your life? Any area of life, I don't mind.
I am going to do a bikini bodybuilding show. 48.
Oh my gosh. When?
I'm gonna go for three of them this year. So one is in June, one's in November, one is in December.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I love, oh, that is good. I hear a lot of women as we get into the sort of 40s, 50s choose to do marathons. I haven't heard a bikini bodybuilding contest yet. So uh, definitely curious to like, why courage in this space for you?
Well, all of the previous things like fear of public speaking, fear of being on stage, fear of being center stage, fear of attention, fear of am I good enough to do this? All those fears. Um, it's a little terrifying,
Oh,
but
yeah,
yeah,
you've got
that's
all
why.
in one. Oh, I love it. And a bikini and body and the whole body thing we've just talked about. Oh, wow. I cannot wait to see this. This is just, this is gorgeous. Terry, if people listening in want to know a little bit more about you, yes, I'll pop all the details in the show notes. But where should they go? Like, where do you typically hang out the most online?
Oh, I'm mostly on Instagram. I don't have any other channels. I can't manage all that, but it's Instagram, and you can find me. How good can it get? That is my handle, and you can also find me on my website. It's thehouseofrose.com, and those are the two places.
I love it. I love it. I'll pop those in the show notes. And I'm so delighted to have had this conversation. So much wisdom, so much depth to who you are. And honestly, I look forward to having more conversations with you. And like I said, to seeing you up on stage in your bikini as a bodybuilder, showing that, if you have started out in life feeling like you weren't good enough, feeling rejected or abandoned, that it is within your power to turn things around. And you too could wear a bikini on a stage showcasing your beautiful body and transformation. Terry, thank you so much. I've absolutely loved having this conversation with you and all about your courage.
Thank you, Kim. You are absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.